The most feared man in the city owned 400 buildings and had never walked into a single one. He learned that on a Tuesday afternoon, in a glass boardroom on the 41st floor, watching a woman on a muted television carry a cardboard box down a set of concrete steps, while a black boy in a school uniform held her coat. Do-hyun Seo did not know her name. He did not hear a word the news anchor said. He was looking at the number on the door behind her. 4B. He owned that door. He owned the frame it hung in and the concrete it was cut into, and he had never once seen it with his own eyes. But she had. She had been standing in front of that door for 11 months, building something quietly, patiently, page by page, and what she was holding in that cardboard box was going to take the entire Seo empire apart from underneath. She wasn't a victim on the news, she was a fuse. And the man who lit her was already inside his own house. If you're still with me, hit that like button, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels, and stay all the way to the end, because the moment she finds out who he is, she doesn't run. She makes him an offer. The boardroom on the 41st floor of the Seo Tower had no windows facing the street. That was deliberate. The architect had explained it, years ago, as a security consideration. Do-hyun had understood it differently. His father had built a room from which the city could not be seen, and had run the city from inside it. 6 men sat around the table, 4 lawyers, 1 accountant, and Kwon, his uncle, though not by blood, and the only man in the room who wasn't afraid of him. They were discussing a port acquisition. Do-hyun had stopped listening 20 minutes ago. The television on the far wall played local news on mute, closed captioning scrolling white across the bottom. It was on because it was always on. Nobody watched it. It was furniture. Then the picture changed, and Do-hyun stopped moving. A black woman on a concrete stoop. Late 30s, hair pulled back, work jacket, a cardboard box against her hip. 2 sheriff's deputies behind her, carrying a couch down a narrow flight of steps like men embarrassed to be seen. A boy, maybe 7, standing very still on the sidewalk, holding her coat over both arms, the way you hold something that isn't yours to drop. The woman was not crying. That was the first thing Do-hyun noticed. Her chin was level and her eyes were dry, and she was looking directly into the camera lens with an expression he recognized instantly because he had spent his entire life learning to wear it. She looked like a woman who had already decided something. And behind her, screwed into a chipped white door, was a brass number, 4, letter B, Do-hyun. He didn't answer. The camera pulled back and the building came into frame. 6 stories, red brick going brown, a fire escape on the east face with a bend in it, a green awning with the name faded halfway off. The Marlowe. Do-hyun's mouth went dry. Do-hyun. Kwon again gentler. You've gone somewhere. Turn the sound on. One of the lawyers reached for the remote. The room filled with a reporter's voice, mid-sentence. The 3rd eviction at this property in 14 months. Residents say the building's ownership has changed hands twice and that repairs stopped over a year ago. The property is currently held by a private trust. Turn it off, Kwon said. The lawyer turned it off. The silence in the boardroom went strange. Do-hyun looked at the black screen for a long moment. Then he looked at his uncle, who was looking at the table. That's the Marlowe, Do-hyun said. It's a small holding. It's on Do-hyun and 5th. Do-hyun, we own it. Kwon lifted his eyes then, and his face did something Do-hyun had never seen it do in 38 years. It arranged itself. Carefully, the way a man arranges his face when he has been asked a question and has already selected which lie to tell. The trust owns it, Kwon said, which is not the same as you owning it. That's the entire point of a trust. So you never have to think about a red brick building on Do-hyun and 5th. There was a woman on that step. There are people on every step in this city. Kwon's voice was warm. It was always warm. That was the thing about him. You have 411 properties. Do you want to know the name of everyone who has ever been asked to leave one? You'd need a second life for it. The lawyers laughed. It was the sound of men agreeing with the wrong person out of habit. Do-hyun stood up. Where are you going? Out. We're not finished. You're finished, Do-hyun said, and pulled the door open. He had a driver. He had 6 of them. He had a man named Jae-won who had been shot twice on his behalf and would do it a 3rd time without being asked, and Jae-won stood by the elevator with his hand already reaching for the car keys. Sir, not you. Sir, nobody comes with me. Do-hyun Seo took a taxi across his own city for the first time in 19 years. The Marlow was not what he expected. He had prepared himself for a slum. That would have been simple. That would have been a problem with a shape, bad management, neglect, a line item he could fix by writing a number on a piece of paper and handing it to someone who cleaned things up. He had spent the ride assembling that plan in his head, like a man assembling a rifle. But the Marlow wasn't a slum. It was worse than that. It was empty. He stood across the street in a coat worth more than a year's rent and counted windows. 6 floors, 8 units a floor. 48 apartments. He counted 9 with curtains. 9 with anything in them at all. A plant, a fan, a strip of light. The rest were black glass and bare rooms, and in a dozen of them, plywood nailed from the inside. Someone had emptied this building, not neglected it, emptied it. Methodically, floor by floor, and left just enough tenants to keep it from being condemned. He had seen this before. He had seen it in his own reports, presented as strategy, when a property was being prepared for a sale that required no complications. You hollowed out the asset, and then you sold a shell. Except no one had told him about this one. No one had put the Marlow in front of him and asked for a signature, or they had, he thought. And I signed it without reading. The eviction notice was still taped to the front door, bright orange, curling at the corner. He crossed the street and read it, and read the name, typed at the top, and something in his chest changed weight. Okonkwo, Amara. Unit 4B. The green awning above him snapped once in the wind. Behind the glass, in the dark lobby, an old Korean man in a cardigan was sitting on a folding chair beside the mailboxes, watching him. Just sitting there, watching him, the way a man watches a thing he already knows the name of. Do-hyun looked back at him for a long moment. Then he took out his phone and called the only number he had for his own property division. I need the chain of title on the Marlow. Dowan and Fifth. A pause. Papers. Typing. Sir, that file is... that one's restricted. Access is limited to... To whom? To Mr. Kwon, sir. Do-hyun stood in the rain in front of a building he owned, that he could not open a file about, and understood, for the first time in his adult life, that he was not the most powerful man in his own organization. He had never been. The county records office closed at 4. Amara Okonkwo got there at 9 in the morning and stayed until they turned the lights off, and she had been doing it, on and off, for 11 months. She knew the clerks by name. She knew which microfiche reader had the bad bulb and which one didn't. She knew that if you requested more than 4 documents in a single day, the woman at the counter would start giving you the look, the one that said, "Whatever you're doing, honey, it isn't going to work." And so she requested 3, every time, and came back tomorrow. She had been evicted 11 hours ago. Her son was at her cousin Rochelle's, doing homework at a kitchen table that was not his own, and everything she owned was in a storage unit on Pearl Street that she had paid for with money she did not have. None of that mattered today. Today, the 2019 deed transfer came up from the archive. She had requested it 4 times. 3 times it had come back, marked, "Not located." This time a young clerk in a cardigan brought it out in a grey folder, set it down on the counter, and said, "It was misfiled under 2020. Somebody put it in the wrong box." Somebody, Amara said, Happens all the time. Sure it does. She carried the folder to a table by the window, sat down, and opened it very slowly, the way you open something you have been dreaming about long enough that you're afraid of what waking up will feel like. Her mother's name was on it. Grace Okonkwo, Voluntary Surrender of Interest, Unit 4B, the Marlow. Dated March 2019. Her mother had died in November 2018. Amara sat there with her hand flat on the paper and did not move for a full minute. The clock on the wall went on doing what clocks do. Outside, a bus pulled away from the curb. Somewhere behind her, a phone rang twice and stopped. Her mother had been dead for 4 months when she signed this. I have you, she thought. Whoever you are, I have you. And then she made herself do the thing she had trained herself to do. Over 11 months, in 100 rooms like this one, she stopped feeling it, and she started reading it. Grantee, trustee, signature block. The trust's name in blocked capitals, Do-hyun Holding Trust, and beneath it, on the line marked Authorized Signatory, a name. She was still reading it when a shadow crossed the table. She looked up. A Korean man was standing over her, late 30s, a black coat, soaked through at the shoulders, rainwater still on his jaw. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the folder. Excuse me, Amara said. That's mine. He didn't move. I said, Do-hyun Holding Trust, he said. Amara went very still. She looked at his coat. She looked at his hands. No calluses. One heavy ring, cuffs that had been made for those exact wrists. She looked at his face, and then she looked down at the piece of paper in front of her, at the name typed beneath the signature line, at the 4 letters she had memorized in the taxi she couldn't afford on the way over. SEO. And then she looked back up at him, and she saw that he had gone pale. Not angry, not caught, pale. Amara Okonkwo had spent 11 months preparing for the moment she found the man who forged her dead mother's signature. She had run the conversation in her head 1,000 times, in the shower, at the bus stop, at 3 in the morning, with her son asleep beside her. In every single version of it, she screamed. She did not scream. She turned the folder around so it faced him and pushed it 4 inches across the table and kept her hand flat on top of it. That's my mother's signature, she said. She died in November 2018. That document is dated March 2019. He didn't touch it. You're either the man who signed this, Amara said, or you're the man who didn't know he did. He looked up at her. Only one of those is useful to me. He didn't answer her for 11 seconds. She counted them, because she had learned that men who take 11 seconds to answer a question are either calculating a lie or discovering a truth, and she wanted to know which one he was. Then he pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down in it and said, I don't know. You don't know? I don't know, he repeated. That's the answer. I've never seen this document. I've never seen your building. Until 4 hours ago, I did not know it existed. You own it. Yes, you own 400 buildings, 411, and you've never been to any of them. He looked at the table. No. Amara sat back. She let the silence sit there, because silence was a tool, and she'd learned how to use it in 100 rooms, exactly like this one, with 100 people, exactly this uncomfortable. What's your name? She said. Do-hyun Seo. My name is Amara Okonkwo, and I've been in this building for 11 months trying to get my mother's apartment back. Not a settlement, not a payout. Her name, back on the deed, where she put it in 1996, when she came here with 2 suitcases and a job cleaning the ferry terminal. She tapped the paper once. Yesterday, your people put my furniture on the sidewalk on television. Today, I found this. So, I'm going to be very honest with you, Mr. Seo, because I don't have the energy to be anything else. She leaned forward. I don't care whether you're a good man. I don't care if you feel bad. I have a 7-year-old sleeping on my cousin's floor and a case that is 11 months old and 80% finished, and you are either an obstacle or a key. So decide which one, and do it fast, because that clerk over there closes at 4, and I've got 2 more requests in me. Do-hyun Seo looked at her for a long moment. Nobody had spoken to him like that in 19 years. He was aware, distantly, the way you're aware of weather, that a man in his position was supposed to feel insulted. What he felt was awake. "What do you need?" he said. "The original." "That is the original. That's the county copy." She turned the folder back around, flipped it open, and pointed at the bottom of the page. A small grey square, a scanning artifact, the faint ghost of a staple hole. "This is a photostat of a photostat. Whoever filed this filed a reproduction." Which means somewhere, in a room I will never be allowed into, there is a piece of paper with actual ink on it, and on that piece of paper is the pressure of the pen, and the pressure of the pen is how you prove a forgery. She closed the folder. Your trust keeps its own archive, private, off-site. Every trust like yours does, because you people don't trust the government to hold your paper any more than the government trusts you. She looked at him levelly. "I can't get into that room. I've tried. Twice. You tried to get into a Sewon facility. I filed a discovery motion, and I got a letter from a law firm with a name so long it took up 2 lines. Amara shrugged one shoulder. "So no, but I tried." Do-hyun stared at her. "You filed a motion," he said slowly, "against the Sewon Trust." "Yes, by yourself." "Well, I couldn't afford anybody else." And Do-hyun Seo, who had been shot at, who had buried a father, who had ordered things done in the dark that he would never say out loud, laughed. Once, short and surprised, like something falling over inside him. She didn't laugh back. She just watched him. "I can get you in the room," he said. The archive was in Incheon, in a grey building, with no sign, behind a door that required 2 keys and a man. The man was Jae-won, and he stood at the end of the corridor with his hands folded and his eyes on the woman, and Do-hyun could see him doing the arithmetic. Who is she? Why is she here? Do I need to know? And could see him arrive at the only conclusion available to a man in his position, which was that it was not his business. Amara did not look at Jae-won. She looked at the shelves. Then she took off her coat, laid it over the back of a chair, put on a pair of cotton gloves she pulled from her jacket pocket. She had brought gloves, and got to work. Do-hyun stood by the door and watched her. She was fast. That was the thing that undid him. She moved down the shelves, reading the spine codes without hesitating, pulled 3 boxes, opened them on the table in a specific order, and started laying documents out in a grid. Not a pile, a grid. With a system in it he could not immediately see, but which was obviously, visibly, a system. She was not a woman fighting her way through unfamiliar territory. She was a woman doing something she had done before, many times. "You've done this," he said. 11 months. "No. This. Archive work. Chain of title." Amara didn't look up. "My mother cleaned buildings," she said. "I read the buildings. Somebody's got to." She held one page up to the light, set it down, picked up another. "Where'd you learn it?" "Public library, mostly. 2 paralegal courses I didn't finish, because my son got sick." She switched 2 documents in the grid. "And a Korean man in a cardigan who lives on the 2nd floor of the Marlow and used to be a records clerk for the city for 31 years. A small dry sound in her throat. "He's been feeding me case law through a mail slot since October." Do-hyun thought of the old man on the folding chair in the lobby, watching him through the glass. He knew who I was, he thought. He was just waiting to see what I'd do. "There," Amara said. She had gone very quiet. Do-hyun crossed the room. She did not look at him. She was standing over a single sheet, with her gloved hands flat on the table, on either side of it, and she was not moving at all. "Give me your ring," she said. "What?" "Your ring. The heavy one. Give it to me." He pulled it off and put it in her palm, without asking why. She tilted it, caught the overhead light on the flat of the stone, and angled the beam low across the paper, a raking light, almost parallel to the page. And the signature stood up, not the ink, the impression, the groove the pen had cut into the fiber, thrown into shadow by the low light, every stroke suddenly three-dimensional, and visible and unmistakably, obviously wrong, because the pressure was even. Because a dying woman does not sign her name with an even hand, and a woman 4 months dead does not sign it at all, and this signature had been made by someone practicing, someone careful, someone who had done it more than once. Amara set the ring down. "There's a spur on the G," she said quietly. "See it? Right there. That's a hesitation mark. It's what happens when somebody's copying a signature and they have to stop and check it against the original halfway through." Do-hyun did not answer. He was looking at something else, not the forged signature, the counter-signature, bottom right, authorized signatory of the Sewon Holding Trust, in a small, precise, beautiful hand that he had seen 10,000 times in his life, on birthday cards, on hospital forms, on the release papers that let him take his father's body home. "Kwon, Mr. Seo." He couldn't move. "Mr. Seo." "Do-hyun," he said. His voice came out wrong. Amara looked at him properly for the first time since she'd walked into the room, really looked, and whatever she saw made her go quiet for a second. "You know that name?" she said. "Yes." "Who is he?" Do-hyun opened his mouth, closed it. "He's the man who raised me," he said. She went through the boxes for 4 more hours. She found 41 units, 41 surrenders, 41 signatures across 3 buildings and 8 years, each one dated after the tenant had died or been moved to a care facility or gone into a hospital with no one left to check the mail. Every single one countersigned in that small, precise, beautiful hand. And every single one paid out into an account. Amara found the account number on the 4th document and wrote it down. She found it again on the 9th. She found it on all 41. She wrote it on a scrap of paper, slid it across the table, and said, "Whose is this?" Do-hyun looked at it. 8 years, 3 buildings, 41 families, roughly, at the numbers he was seeing, somewhere north of $40 million, and every cent of it running through an account he had opened himself, at 26, on an afternoon when his uncle had put a form in front of him and said, "Sign here, it's for the property arm, it's nothing, it's paperwork." "It's mine," Do-hyun said. The room was very quiet. "It's mine," he said again. "I've been signing for it. For 8 years, I've been signing for it. And I never—" He stopped. He put a hand flat on the table because his hand needed somewhere to be. Amara Okonkwo watched a man discover that he was the front for a theft nobody had told him about. She watched it happen in real time, in a cold grey archive in Incheon, and she did not say a single comforting word to him. She let him have it. That was the mercy she gave him. She didn't soften it. Then she took a fresh sheet of paper out of her bag, uncapped a pen, and wrote a column of 41 names down the left-hand side. She turned it around and set it in front of him. "There's my mother," she said, pointing halfway down. "Grace Okonkwo, and there's 40 more." Do-hyun read the list. "Now here's where we are," Amara said, and her voice had changed. It had gone level and cold and completely clear, and Do-hyun looked up because it was the voice of someone about to hand him something heavy. "I can win my case alone, quietly." I take the 4B forgery to a judge, I get my mother's name back, and I walk away with a settlement and an apartment and a son who gets to grow up in the room he was born in. She let that sit. That's the smart move. That's the move a good mother makes. She tapped the list. Or I file for all 41, which makes it fraud and pattern and a federal matter, and by Friday, every single name on this page is a target, including mine, including my son's. Do-hyun stared at the paper. You understand what you're telling me, he said. Yes. He will kill you. He'll try, Amara said. That's not the question. Then what's the question? She stood up. She started pulling off her gloves, one finger at a time, and she did not look away from him. I've already decided, she said. I'm filing all 41. I decided in the taxi on the way here, before I knew your name, before I knew you owned anything. I'm telling you now so you have a chance to be somewhere else when it lands. She put the gloves in her pocket. So that's my question, Do-hyun Seo. She picked up her coat. Where do you want to be standing on Friday? She filed on Thursday. The response came on Friday, and it did not come with a gun. That was the part people never understood about men like Kwon. Violence was what you used when you had run out of better instruments, and Kwon had a very large drawer of better instruments. At 6:14 on Friday morning, the night shift scheduler at St. Bede's Medical Center called Amara Okonkwo and told her, with genuine regret in his voice, that her hours had been restructured and that she should not come in tonight, or the next night, or any night. At 9:40, the storage facility on Pearl Street called to say that her unit's payment had been flagged as fraudulent and the contents would be held pending review. At 11:02, the vice principal of her son's elementary school called and asked her, very carefully, whether she was aware that a complaint had been filed with Child Services regarding a minor's living conditions and the stability of his primary caregiver. By who? Amara said. It was anonymous, Ms. Okonkwo. She stood in her cousin Rochelle's kitchen, with the phone against her ear, and looked at her son's backpack hanging on the door handle, and understood exactly what she was being told. We can take him. We can't take your case. We can't take your mother's name. But we can take him, and we can do it legally, with a caseworker and a folder and a form, and we will, unless you stop. Amara Okonkwo put the phone down on the counter, very gently, the way you set down something that will shatter. Then she went into the bathroom, closed the door, ran the tap so nobody would hear, and cried for 4 minutes with her fist against her mouth. Then she washed her face, came out, and started making phone calls. Do-hyun found her that afternoon on a bench outside the courthouse, eating a gas station sandwich, with a legal pad on her knee and 41 names on it, and a pen moving fast. He sat down beside her. He'd been to 14 places looking for her. They called about your son, he said. You knew that would happen. I know how he works. Then you should have told me on Wednesday, Amara said, not looking up, still writing, instead of Friday. That landed. He took it. I can end this, Do-hyun said. She kept writing. Amara, I heard you. I can end it tonight. I can have him at the bottom of the harbour by midnight, and no one will ever ask a single question. And by Monday, every deed on that list goes back where it came from, and you and your son sleep in your own beds. He was not whispering. That was the strange thing. He said it in a normal voice, on a bench, in the middle of the afternoon. I want you to understand that this is a real offer. It isn't a threat, and it isn't a metaphor. I am telling you what I can do. Amara Okonkwo stopped writing. She put the pen down on the pad. She turned her head and looked at him, and for a long moment she said nothing at all. No, she said. Amara, no. She set the pad aside. And I need you to hear the reason, because it isn't the reason you think. She turned on the bench to face him fully. It's not because I'm squeamish. It's not because I'm a good Christian woman and killing is wrong, though it is. Her jaw set. It's because if you kill him, I'm a story. Do-hyun frowned. Think about it, she said. Man dies, body turns up, or doesn't. And the woman who filed against him 3 days earlier, what is she? She's a footnote in an underworld hit. She's the mistress of a mafia boss. She's a black woman who got mixed up with dangerous people and got what she got. And every single one of those 41 deeds becomes evidence in a murder case instead of a fraud case, and it gets sealed, and it sits in a box for 11 years, and not one family on that list ever sees their apartment again. She jabbed a finger into the legal pad. You kill him, and I'm a story. I stay legal, and I'm a record. Do-hyun sat very still. A record can't be shot, Amara said. That's the whole point. That's the only thing in this entire world that can't be shot. So no, Do-hyun, you don't get to solve this the way your family solves things. Not with my mother's name. She picked her pen back up. Besides, she said, you think I'd let you hand my son a father who did that? He's 7. He's going to ask what happened one day, and I am going to be able to answer him. Do-hyun Seo looked at the courthouse steps, and the pigeons, and the ordinary afternoon, and he did not say anything for a while. Then he said, What do you need? A hallway, said Amara. She moved back into 4B, on Saturday, illegally, fully aware of it. She got a locksmith who owed the old Korean man in the cardigan a favor from 2004, and at 9 in the morning she opened the door of her mother's apartment and walked into a room that was completely empty except for the light. She sat down on the floor in the middle of it. Her mother had died in this room, in November. In the afternoon, with the window open, because she'd said she wanted to hear the street, Amara sat there for a long time. Then she got up, went down to the storage unit that she was not allowed to access, talked her way past a security guard using nothing but a folder and a level voice, and came back up the stairs of the Marlowe, carrying a kitchen table. She set it in the middle of Unit 4B. She put a chair beside it. She put the case file on top of it, squared to the edges, and then she opened the door and left it open. By Sunday, there were chairs in the hallway. Nobody organized it. That was what Do-hyun could never afterward explain to himself. Nobody organized it. The old Korean man in the cardigan brought his folding chair up from the lobby and set it at the top of the stairs and sat down in it with a newspaper. A black woman in her 70s from 6C brought a thermos. 2 Korean sisters from the second floor, both retired, brought a card table and started playing cards on it at the end of the corridor. Badly, for hours. 9 tenants. That was all that was left in a building of 48 units. By Sunday evening, all 9 of them were in that hallway. Amara came out at one point and told them to go home. The old Korean man in the cardigan turned a page of his newspaper and said, without looking up, I am home. She stood in the doorway and looked at all of them, and something in her face came apart for about a second and a half before she got it back. Then she went inside and kept working. Kwon's men came on Monday at 5:40 in the evening. Do-hyun was on the 3rd floor landing when he heard the street door. 4 men. He knew all 4 of them. He had eaten dinner with 2 of them. They came up the stairs unhurried, in good coats, the way men come upstairs when they expect the stairs to be empty. They stopped at the 4th floor. Because the 4th floor was not empty. 9 people. An old Korean man in a cardigan with a newspaper. A black woman in her 70s with a thermos. 2 elderly Korean sisters at a card table. A black man in his 60s with a walking stick across his knees. 4 more, in chairs, sitting. Nobody was armed. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was blocking anything. Technically, you could have walked between them. They were just there. 9 old people in a corridor, sitting down, not moving, between 4 men and a white door with a brass 4B on it. The lead man stopped walking. He looked at them. He looked back down the stairs, and Do-hyun watched a professional discover that he had no procedure for this. Then Do-hyun stepped out of the stairwell. "Go home," he said. The lead man's face did something complicated. "Sir, I said go home. Sir, we're not here for you. I know exactly who you're here for." A phone rang. It rang in the lead man's coat pocket, and every person in that hallway heard it. He took it out. He looked at the screen. He looked at Do-hyun. Then he held it out. Do-hyun took it and put it to his ear. "Do-hyun, ah," said Kwon. Do-hyun said nothing. "Come home," Kwon said, and his voice was warm, because it was always warm. "You're standing in a stairwell in a building that's going to be a parking structure in 18 months. Come home and we'll sit down and I will explain all of it, and you will understand because you are not a stupid boy and you never were." 41 people, Do-hyun said. 41 apartments. Her mother's name is on one of them. A pause on the line, a long one. And when Kwon spoke again, his voice was still warm, and that was the worst part. It was still warm. "Do-hyun, my boy." Kwon exhaled. "Your father signed the first one." Do-hyun stopped breathing. In 2003, a man in 2C died, and his sister lived in Busan and never came. Kwon's voice was gentle, patient, the voice of a man explaining a bruise to a child. "He signed it. He showed me how, and when he died, I kept signing, because somebody had to, and because you were 26 years old, and I did not want you to have to be the kind of man who signs those." He let it sit. "I did that for you." Behind Do-hyun, in a corridor full of 9 old people, the door of 4B opened. Amara Okonkwo stood in it with a document in her hand, and Do-hyun Seo, holding a phone against his ear on a 4th-floor landing, understood that he had never in his life owned anything at all. She ended it herself. That was the part nobody in the hallway understood while it was happening. They saw a woman in a doorway with a piece of paper in her hand, and they thought, the ones who thought anything, that she had come out to be defended. She had come out to send them away. "Go home," Amara said. The old Korean man in the cardigan looked up from his newspaper. "Amara, go home." Her voice cracked across the corridor like something breaking. "All of you, right now, get up and go downstairs and lock your doors. We're not leaving you here." "You're not helping me," Amara said, and she said it so hard that the old man flinched. "Listen to me. Listen. The second one of you gets hurt in this hallway, this stops being about a deed. It becomes an assault, and then it becomes a police report, and then it becomes a fight, and my case dies. It dies in the noise. That is exactly what they want." She looked at every one of them. "You want to protect me? Then don't give them a body. Don't give them a single bruise. Go downstairs and go inside, and let this stay on paper." Nobody moved. "Please," Amara said, and her voice came apart on it. "Please. I have got one thing in this world that they cannot take, and it is a clean record and a clean witness and a clean piece of paper. Don't let them make it dirty." The 2 Korean sisters folded their card table. Slowly, in ones and twos, 9 people got up and went down the stairs. The old Korean man was last. He stopped in front of her, and he did not touch her, and he said, in a voice like a page turning, "Your mother had the same face when she was angry." Then he went down too. Amara Okonkwo stood alone in an empty hallway with 4 men in good coats at the end of it, and Do-hyun Seo beside her, holding a phone. She held out her hand for it. He gave it to her. "Mr. Kwon," she said. A silence on the line. "Ms. Okonkwo, you know my name." "I have known your name," Kwon said pleasantly, "for 11 months. Then you know I don't waste time." Amara turned and walked back into 4B, and Do-hyun followed, and she set the phone on the kitchen table and put it on speaker. "I want to meet? I don't think that's. I have the original." The line went absolutely silent. Amara looked at the phone. The 2019 surrender, she said. The physical document, not the county copy. The paper with the ink on it, and the pressure in it, and the hesitation mark on the G. She let it hang. I've been carrying it for 3 days. It's in my bag right now, and you know what that means, so I'm not going to insult you by explaining it. Where? Kwon said, and his voice was not warm anymore. Tomorrow, said Amara. 10 o'clock. I'll text you the address. She hung up. Do-hyun stared at her. You don't have the original, he said. You put it. Do-hyun. You logged it. I watched you log it. Do-hyun. Amara pulled out the chair and sat down, and she looked more tired than he had ever seen a human being look. I need you to do something for me, and I need you not to ask me what it's for. Amara. Tomorrow morning, she said, at 9:20, I need you to be somewhere very public and very far away from me, with 6 people who will swear you were there. No, that's not a request. I'm not leaving you alone with him. You're not leaving me alone with him, Amara said. You're leaving me clean. She reached across the table and put her hand flat on the case file, and she looked up at him. If you're in that room, then whatever comes out of it is a Mafia settlement, she said quietly. If you're not, it's a woman and a signature. That's the whole difference. That's the entire case. Do-hyun. Your presence is the only thing left that can lose it. Do-hyun Seo stood in an empty apartment and could not think of a single thing to say. I have spent 11 months, Amara said, making myself into the most boring possible person for a courtroom to look at. A nurse, a mother, a woman with a folder. Do you know how hard that is? Do you have any idea how hard I have worked to be nobody? She held his eyes. Don't make me interesting. He didn't sleep. He sat in a car outside the Marlow from midnight until dawn, and at 6 a.m. Jae-won brought him coffee and did not ask why he was there, and at 8 a.m. Do-hyun Seo drove to a press conference for a port acquisition he did not care about and stood at a podium in front of 40 cameras and said words he did not hear himself say. 6 people would swear he was there, 40 cameras would prove it. At 9:58 in the morning, Amara Okonkwo walked into the main branch of the Hanyang Commercial Bank on Do-hyun Street. She had chosen it carefully. Not a warehouse, not a car park, not a restaurant with a back room and a door onto an alley. A bank with a marble floor and 9 tellers and a security desk and 11 cameras in the ceiling and 40 ordinary people standing in a queue on an ordinary Tuesday morning, none of whom knew who anyone was. She had chosen it because a man like Kwon could not be a monster in a room like this. He would have to be a customer. He was already there. He was sitting in the customer waiting area, in a beautiful grey coat, with his hands folded in his lap and his ankles crossed, and he looked exactly like what he was pretending to be, a distinguished older Korean man waiting to speak to someone about an account. 2 of his men stood by the door. They did not come in further. They couldn't. There was nowhere for them to stand. Amara sat down across from him. Miss Okonkwo. Mr. Kwon. He looked at her for a while, and to her surprise, there was nothing hateful in it at all. He looked at her the way a man looks at a piece of machinery that has done something unexpected, with a kind of professional interest. 11 months, he said, in the county office, 3 requests a day. You knew. Of course I knew. I misfiled the 19 transfer myself. He tilted his head, twice. The clerk found it anyway. Yes. Kwon almost smiled. I have been doing this for a long time, Ms. Okonkwo, and I want you to understand something. In 22 years, nobody has ever gotten this far. Not lawyers, not the city, not one of them. He studied her. The last person who came close was a Korean man in a cardigan on the 2nd floor, and I broke him in 4 months. You didn't break him, didn't I? He was in my hallway last night. Kwon's eyes flickered. Just once. just barely, and Amara saw it, and she filed it, and she went on. "I'm going to make you an offer," she said, "and you're going to take it, because you have exactly one problem in the world, and I'm holding it." She put her bag on her knees. She took out a grey folder and opened it and turned it around on the low table between them. The 2019 surrender, the original. The staple hole, the ink. Kwon did not reach for it. He looked at it for a long, long moment, and Amara watched a man's entire life sitting on a coffee table in a bank lobby. "Burn it," he said. "That's the idea," said Amara. She took out a second document. "Restoration of interest," she said. "All 41 units, full reversal of the surrenders, deeds returned to the estates of the original holders, all costs borne by the Sewon Holding Trust. It's 12 pages. It's already drafted, it's already correct, and it's already dated." She set it down beside the first. "It needs one signature. Yours, authorized signatory. And in exchange, said Amara, "I burn that." She nodded at the surrender. "In front of you. In this room. Right now." Kwon looked at the two documents side by side on the table. "You understand what you're offering me," he said. "Yes. You're offering me 41 apartments in exchange for the only evidence that I stole them, which means I lose 41 apartments and I lose nothing else." He looked up at her. "I lose money, Ms. Okonkwo. That's all. You are letting me walk away." "Yes. Why?" "Because I want my mother's name on a piece of paper," Amara said, "and I have a 7-year-old, and I would rather be alive to raise him than be right in a courtroom in 4 years." She said it perfectly. She had practiced it in a mirror at Rochelle's for 2 hours. Kwon looked at her for a long, long time. Then he laughed, softly, almost fondly, and he picked up a pen. "Do you know," he said, uncapping it, "you are the first person in 22 years who has understood what I actually am." "What are you?" "An accountant," said Kwon, and signed his name. He signed all 12 pages. He signed them in a marble bank lobby at 10 in the morning with a notary from the third desk standing over him because Amara had booked her 40 minutes earlier, and with 11 cameras in the ceiling, and with 40 ordinary people standing in an ordinary queue 8 feet away. He signed them because he was getting the paper back. The notary stamped the final page and went away. Amara stood up. She picked up the 2019 surrender, the original, the one with the ink and the staple hole and the hesitation mark on the G, and she carried it to the bank's little side table where the deposit slips were, and Kwon walked with her, and she took a lighter out of her coat pocket. She held the corner of the page to the flame. It caught, it curled, it went brown and then black, and the ink went last, the way ink does, her mother's name lifting off the page in the last second before it disappeared. Kwon watched it burn all the way down. He watched it until it was ash in the metal tray, and then he watched Amara Okonkwo look at the ash, and then he looked at her face. And he understood. He understood, in the space of about a quarter of a second, before she had said anything, before she had moved, because he was a man who had been reading faces for 50 years, and there was nothing on hers. No grief, no triumph, nothing. You do not watch your mother's forged signature burn to nothing with a face like that, unless it isn't your mother's signature, unless it's a photocopy. "Ms. Okonkwo," said Kwon, very quietly. Amara pulled her phone out of her pocket, turned it around, and held it up. "A submission receipt, Federal Court, Electronic Filing Portal, received 09:18 a.m., 40 minutes before he walked into the bank. The original's been in a clerk's hands since this morning," she said. "Sealed, logged, time-stamped." She put the phone away. "So has the account trace. So have the other 40. Kwon did not move. "And that," Amara said, nodding at the 12 pages under the notary's stamp on the table behind him, "is now a signed, witnessed, notarized admission that the Sewon Holding Trust illegally acquired all 41 of them. She picked up her bag. "You didn't sign a settlement, Mr. Kwon." She put it on her shoulder. "You signed a confession." He stood there. He was 71 years old, in a beautiful grey coat, in the middle of a bank on a Tuesday morning, with 11 cameras in the ceiling and 40 people in a queue, and 2 men by the door who could not do one single thing to help him. And the only thought in his head, the only clear thought, arriving from very far away, was, "She chose this room. She chose this room a week ago." He looked at the woman who had done it to him. "He'll lose everything," Kwon said. "Do-hyun, when this opens up, they'll take all of it. The trust, the port, the whole architecture. 50 years, gone. You understand that. You've just destroyed him too." "I know," said Amara, "and you did it anyway." "He did it anyway," she said. "I just held the door." She turned and walked out across the marble. She walked past the queue and the tellers and the 2 men in coats by the door, who stepped aside because they had no instructions and no idea, and she pushed the glass door open with her shoulder and went out into the street. She got 20 feet. Then she stopped and put her hand against a wall and stood there shaking for a solid minute while the city went by around her. It took 9 weeks. Kwon was arrested on a Thursday and never made a statement. Not one. Not in 9 weeks. And everyone who knew him understood that this was not loyalty. It was arithmetic. He had run the numbers on what talking would cost, and it came out worse than silence, and so he was silent. It didn't matter. The 41 deeds were the thread, and once federal auditors had the thread, they pulled it, and behind it came the trust, and behind the trust came the shells, and behind the shells came the port contracts and the freight manifests and the 50-year architecture that Do-hyun Seo's father had built out of paper and patience and other people's homes. All of it came down. Do-hyun's name came out of it clean. That was the thing that people would find hardest to believe. Afterward, he was never charged. The signatures on the account were his, but the intent wasn't, and the auditors could see it, and Kwon's own restoration document proved it, because in 12 notarized pages, the authorized signatory had taken sole responsibility for every single transfer in order to make the deal work. Kwon had signed away his own defense to get a piece of paper back. Amara had known he would. She had built the entire thing on it. So Do-hyun Seo walked out of it with no charges, no record, and nothing else. No trust, no port, no tower on the 41st floor. No organization, because there was no longer anything for an organization to be for. 50 years, gone in 9 weeks, because a woman pulled one deed out of the bottom of it. He kept the coat. The deeds went back in March. 41 of them, restored to the estates of 41 people, most of them dead, some of them with children who had to be found in 3 countries, and one of them with nobody left at all, so the unit went to the city and stayed empty. Unit 4B, the Marlow, Dowen and 5th, went back into the name of Grace Okonkwo, and then, by succession, into the name of her daughter. Amara went to the county office to pick up the paper. The clerk in the cardigan handed it across the counter and said, "You're the one who's been in here every week." "Yes, 11 months, 14, said Amara. She walked home. It was 4 miles, and she walked all of it, holding a folder against her chest with both arms, and she did not cry until she was inside the building with the door shut behind her. He came in April. She was in 4B, in the kitchen, in the room her mother had died in, and the window was open because she'd started leaving it open, and the case files were finally off the table and in a box in the closet where boxes belong. There was a knock. She knew who it was before she opened it. She'd known for a month that he would come eventually, and she had thought about what she'd do and had not arrived at an answer. Do-hyun Seo stood in the hallway of the Marlowe in a coat that was 3 seasons old. He had nothing. He had no car downstairs, and no men in the stairwell, and no leverage, and no offer, and no empire, and he had spent 40 minutes on the 4th floor landing before he knocked, because he could not work out what a man says when he has nothing to say it with. "I don't have anything," he said. "I know. I'm not here to—" He stopped, started over. "I don't want anything from you. I want that to be clear. I'm not—" He looked at the doorframe. "I don't have a reason to be here." Amara looked at him for a long time. Behind her, in the apartment, a 7-year-old was doing homework at a kitchen table with a pencil he kept dropping. "Ma," Elijah called. "Who is it?" Amara did not answer him. She looked at Do-hyun Seo, standing in the hallway with his hands at his sides, and she thought about the archive in Incheon and the bench outside the courthouse, and a man in a stairwell saying "go home" to 4 men he'd eaten dinner with. And she thought about what it cost him, not the money. She didn't care about the money. The father, the uncle, the 50 years, the version of himself in which he was a man who simply signed things. She had taken all of it, on purpose, knowing. "You want coffee?" she said. Do-hyun blinked. "Yes." "Then come in." She stepped back from the door. That was all it was. She stepped back from the door, and that was the whole thing, and both of them knew it. She had not let him into her life. She had let him into a room, for coffee, because she decided, in her own house, on her own deed, with her own name on the paper in the closet. He came in. It was not a soft evening. Elijah looked at him the way a 7-year-old looks at a man his mother has let into the house, which is to say, with total, undisguised, unforgiving assessment, and then said, "Are you the one from the TV, Elijah?" "He is, though." "It's all right," Do-hyun said. "You're the one who owned the building." The kitchen went quiet. Do-hyun Seo sat at a table in an apartment he had once technically owned, across from a boy who was too young to be lied to well and too old to be lied to badly, and he did the only thing he had left. "Yes," he said, "I was." Elijah looked at his mother. Amara did not help him. She stood at the counter with a coffee pot in her hand, and she let it happen, because it was going to happen at some point. This year, or in 10, and she had decided long ago that when it did, she would not soften it. "Did you take our house?" Elijah said. "No," said Do-hyun, "but I didn't stop the man who did, for 8 years, because I never looked." Elijah frowned at him. He was working something out. "Then who got it back?" Do-hyun looked at Amara. "Your mother," he said. "That's the scar. It isn't the money. It isn't the empire. It isn't even Kwon, who died in a federal facility 11 months later and whose funeral Do-hyun attended alone and stood at and did not speak. The scar is this: Elijah Okonkwo will grow up knowing exactly what his mother did. He will grow up knowing that she chose 40 strangers over his safety and that she was right, and that being right nearly cost him her. He will be proud of it, and he will be angry about it, and both of those will be true for the rest of his life. 9 tenants came back to the Marlowe, and 32 apartments stayed empty, because you cannot restore a deed to a person who is dead. The old Korean man in the cardigan sits in the lobby every morning and still flinches, slightly, when the street door opens hard. And Do-hyun Seo, who was once the most powerful man in the city, drinks coffee at a kitchen table on the 4th floor of a building he no longer owns, and washes his own cup afterward, and goes home, slowly, very slowly, over months. The last thing. It was a Sunday, and Elijah was asleep on the couch, and the window was open, because the window was always open now, and Amara reached into the closet and took out a single sheet of paper. She put it on the kitchen table between them. She turned it face up so he could read it. Grace Okonkwo, Unit 4B, the Marlowe. Do-hyun looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her. She didn't say stay, she didn't say I forgive you, and she didn't say I love you, and she was not going to say either of those things for a long, long time, and possibly never in those words. She put one finger on her mother's name. "Read it," she said, out loud. And Do-hyun Seo, who had been born into a family that never had to explain itself, who had never once been asked to prove that he could be trusted with anything, who had signed 411 documents without reading a single one, read it, slowly, every word, all the way to the bottom, and when he got to her mother's name, he stopped and started again and got it right